Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I am your host, Brian Scott. It is a beautiful day to read the wonderful channelings of Quo, a group of spiritual beings from a higher density channeling through LL Research. We have a series of Quo channelings on the channel that we have read, and they are amazing. They answer questions of a spiritual nature and explore topics related to our transition into fourth density Earth, related to the law of one material, originally the raw material, delivered in the 80s. Today, the topic is spiritual pride, something I am guilty of. When I've read as much and practiced as much spiritually, it is inevitable that you develop a sort of pride about your spiritual knowledge. And I want to tamper this down and deal with it and regain the humility that is appropriate in the present climate. And they ask this question of Quo. We begin with a channeling delivered on March 14th, 1993. Question this afternoon concerns spiritual pride. We'd like to hear some information about the kinds of spiritual pride that both groups and individuals could be aware of. From Quo's point of view, it is probably easier to spot spiritual pride. We would like to know some of the pitfalls as well of spiritual pride and what a seeker or a group can do to balance the spiritual pride and regain the humility which seems to be such a great ally of the seeker. We are those of Quo. Greetings in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. How privileged we feel to be called to this group to share our opinions with you on the subject of spiritual pride. We have many group memories of this continuing topic, and the concept is chosen well in that it is a lesson that is not learned once, but as far as we know, continually, again and again, throughout the densities with which we are all familiar. When entities speak of pride, there is usually an emotional bias to the term. Pride is considered as a synonym for arrogance. It is not considered appropriate to think too well of oneself. Yet before we speak of pitfalls of spiritual pride, we would point out that a just and fair estimate of one's assets is a work of lucid observation and cannot be said to constitute a spiritual pride in and of itself. Indeed, the balanced seeker moves upon the seat of knowledge of the self, and this seat serves it well as it does the toe dance or the high wire act through all of the situations which provide interesting food for thought and action in your day-to-day world. It is not spiritual pride accurately to estimate one's abilities or lack thereof in a given situation. Now, spiritual pride is focused upon both by your Eastern religious systems and your Western religious systems. For instance, the one known as the Buddha is said to have found all of the various items of doing, such as serving as a prince or king and loving and being loved, to fill him up, not with the fullness which true worship brings, but with the growing observation that all of each activity and way of expressing the self within the life pattern was prideful folly. In this mythical story, the Buddha at last is cast as a ferryman rowing other seekers across a river from one side to another. A man content at last with the fullness of everlasting change. Within the Western tradition or myth, the one known as Jesus speaks often concerning entities which may feel that they are doing well. There is the example of the man who was extremely virtuous in observation of each and every commandment, yet when the seeker asked the teacher known as Jesus what more he could do to follow him, the one known as Jesus suggested that this wealthy man sell all that he had and thus be free. This parable has made entities which have a comfortable living nervous ever since these words were heard and written down. The parable is not so much about money or other kinds of wealth as it is about one's relationship to that which comes and goes. The body, for instance, is born and dies, yet it is not prideful to care for it, that it may be comfortable and serve well. So with one's estate in life, it is not a crime to conserve one's wealth and to so use it that one is comfortable. Yet if one wishes to hold on to the body by avoiding getting old or avoiding death, then there is the question of what takes precedence, the body or the soul. With the wealth of money or power, this same question holds true. Is there the relationship of conserver or steward with wealth, so that it be used prudently or with charity, or is there the grabbing onto or owning the wealth or influence? If there is the latter, there are some possessions to be sold so that you may follow the mind, which this instrument often calls Christ consciousness. Spiritual pride is about ascribing ownership about absolutely anything at all to anyone except the infinite Creator. Examine what there is in the universe. There is one great original thought. This thought is the love of the infinite Creator. This living thought of love is the Logos which, potentiated by free will, has created and is creating all that there is. This creation is made of the first fruit of the Logos, the first manifestation, which is light. Out of light, love is created, and will create forever the infinite unity of all that there is. If this be so, each seeker is of love, made for love, made by love, made to love. To love is the infinity of a verb, so all entities may truly be seen not as nouns, not as persons or as objects, but as energetic words which activate and enable love to be expressed and received from love to love for love's sake. Indeed, the creation is made of mirrors, endlessly love reflecting love. Where then fits any individual expression? Each individual possesses its own subjective conscious awareness, and is as that awareness gives it to be. Every gift, every talent, every seeming liability, every lucky and unlucky accident of fate that has shaped who you are is an occurrence drenched in love. Thusly, the way out of being caught in spiritual pride is not as one might think to call upon humility. For humility is a kind of pride. If one is conscious of being humble, it is because there has been a choice to tell oneself or to behave to others to tell them that you have the consciousness of humility. Rather, true humility is of the one who, without thinking either well or ill of the self, has the impulse to serve under any conditions whatsoever. While another is seeking to be humble, the truly humble entity has already found a way to be of service, perhaps by listening to the conversation of the one who is seeking to be humble. Humility, in its balanced state, simply moves with the occurrences which come before the vision in the passing moments of your day-to-day experience. There is the challenge, then, to find a way off the Ferris wheel or the merry-go-round of judging the self to be prideful or striving to be more humble. How, when one has felt one's prideful ownership of that which is the Creator's, does this seeker step off the merry-go-round which rolls between the dynamics of pride and humility? It is a daring suggestion, but we do suggest that there is sometimes a need for the benign neglect of one's powers of inward perception. Thinking about being less prideful is merely an engraving mechanism for etching even deeper into the consciousness the concept of one's being prideful and seeking humility. Once one feels one has become humble, that very statement is a prideful statement. Like all dynamic opposites of the spiritual life, the way away from the dilemma is by turning from both extremes towards the infinite Creator's love, allowing the train of the mind to chug away into the far distance and be gone, so that the silent inner countryside of the heart and the spirit may be full of the silence into which love comes, and from which the seeker may be transformed into that which love shines through. This transparency to the infinite Creator is a product of one who continuously turns from too much examination and study to the mystery. In turning to the mystery, seekers finally face their life as unknowable, as hidden within an unknowing which is absolute. Yes, much may be gained by the study of inspirational works, by listening to those whose spiritual seeking has produced fruits which can be communicated. Yet no matter how many riches of knowledge and wisdom the seeker piles up, no final gain can be said to be produced in this way. Only in the silence of the listening and harnessing spirit is there the realization of the crystalline, shining, transparent self that is merely a sun catcher, merely there to act within manifestation as a servant of love. You ask what pitfalls there may be for individuals or groups. The first pitfall is to worry, to be overly concerned about such things as spiritual pride. This falls somewhat under the category of taking the spiritual temperature. The other pitfalls are those created by circumstance, wherein there is the opportunity to communicate with others, not strictly attempting to voice thoughts of love, but attempting in some way to defend or impress. The impulse to defend when communicating is that fear-driven impulse which is motivated by characteristics within such pride. It is the desire to have another or even the self think well of who you are or what is being done by you. The desire to impress is a special kind of defense, an offensive defense, shall we say, where one is moved to attempt to bedazzle or otherwise impress others with the qualities which you yourself consider impressive. Whether those qualities include humility or whether they are simply a list of degrees or achievements, the impulse is the same and is prideful. It is not ever necessary that others grasp who you are or what you're doing. It is acceptable, in our opinion, to be misunderstood, misvalued, or misestimated. It is acceptable for others to think better of you than you think appropriate, just as it is acceptable for others to think less. Release ownership of who you are. You cannot fly away from who you are, yet how closely you clutch and cling to this identity and attempt to torture it into ever more excellent details of behavior, appearance, conduct, and thought. Yet you are asked only to love and worship a mystery and to embrace others just as you embrace, forgive, and accept yourself. Seek to put your life in the Creator's hands, and the Creator's life will be in your hands. You then will be the perfect mirror, transparent to the light and the love of the Infinite One, so that there is no flaw in the backing of your light mirror. Seek simply to know your identity in love. Turn from any consideration as frequently as possible and spend precious moments with the love that you are, with the love that you then may share. We thank this instrument and would at this time move to the one known as Jim. And may we say we are grateful that this entity wishes to receive our contact at this time. We are those of Quo, and we leave this instrument in love and in light. Jim channeling. I am Quo and greet each again in love and light through this instrument. At this time it is our privilege to offer ourselves in the attempt to speak to any further queries which those present may have for us. Is there a query at this time? Carla asks, well, maybe it will be cleared up when I read it, but in trying to listen to what you had to say, I just kept thinking of how it felt this week when it occurred to me that I had acted as if I owned this virtuous prayer group and that somehow I had been doing this. There was a feeling there of distaste, and I judge myself like that a lot. I judge myself all the time. I understand that you just turn from your wickedness and live, as it says in the liturgy. You just turn and behold the mystery. But at the same time, there remains that voice within that will pop up again and again and tell me that that really is prideful. Could you speak to that? I am Quo, and I'm aware of your query, my sister. It is, of course, the great strength of each seeker to look with the critical eye at all experience, seeking to discern that which has value and that which does not. This critical eye, when turned upon the self, as it is most often for the conscious seeker, lends itself most frequently in the careful examination of the experience through which one moves. The response is both mental and emotional to each experience and continues this reflecting process over and over until there is a resolution that is acceptable to the seeker. When one attempts to view the inner and emotional response to perceive spiritual pride, one is bringing to bear this critical process upon a topic which is frequently overlooked by many. For the feeling that one is proceeding well along the spiritual path is in itself a feeling which can both encourage and mislead. Thus, we advise each seeker to look carefully at that experience, to examine the details as they occur, to make discriminations and choices that will alter one's perception and perhaps one's behavior, and then to move onward as one would in learning any discipline. All learning requires practice. All learning requires a certain amount of what you would call failure, for it is the failing to hit the mark that teaches one where the weakness lies in the discipline. Then we advise further that the seeker should release concern for this area, as it is well to release over-concern for any area of learning in order that the concern does not become over-exercised and cause a kind of blocking caution that would inhibit further progress. This is where the lightness of touch is recommended. the sense of perception, and humor with which one views the self and the world about one. For there is indeed much humor in each learning process, the attempt that is well-intentioned and full of vigor of fulfilling an ideal. The falling short that is inevitable with all learning. The recovery, as with the kitten that has almost landed on its feet but stumbles somewhat as it regains its balance, and the assessment of the situation with the puzzled look upon the spiritual face. And the moving on to again tackle the ball of yarn, shall we say, in this great untangling process through which each of you moves. Is there another query, my sister? I have a query, Ko. I wonder what you would say to the seekers who try to stay in touch with this particular group, who live far away in our environment to participate in the meditations, and who feel they are frustrated being too far out to be in touch. How would you comment on those feelings that I think many of them have? I am Ko, and am aware of your query, my brother. To those who feel there is inspiration in the words which move through this group, and who feel physically removed at a distance, shall we say, and who wish to feel a community of purpose, and who wish to walk more closely in spirit with this group, we would say that we walk with each of these entities and are available to each, upon their request, as those who would aid in deepening their meditation. I am Ko, and we shall continue. We seek to aid in the meditative state upon request, and we offer ourselves there without words, but in the joining of the vibratory levels of beingness. We are also aware that those in this group are most happy to respond to queries and comments of those who read and hear the words of love and light that are available through this particular group. There is much community that may be shared through the written word that communicates the spirit of comradeship and exemplifies the seeking of the many portions of the one Creator. Is there another query? Let me just restate for clarity and see if I understand correctly. When someone in silent meditation requests your help, in deepening the meditation, you are with that particular entity, is that correct? I am Ko, and this is correct, my brother. We gladly offer ourselves in joining of vibrations with all who ask our presence in their meditative states. Is there another query? I have one more. I have a letter that I just sent off yesterday to a guy in New Orleans who wanted to know if there was a teacher of channeling in that area that I could recommend. There wasn't one that I could recommend, and I said to him, don't listen to people who tell you that it is perfectly safe to channel, because it is a crowded universe, and there are all kinds of entities out there who wish to speak to you of various vibrations. And then I said, if you wish only to contact your inner guide, perhaps I can help you by tape. Could you comment on both the first and second part of what I said to the person? Could I have answered better? Could I have answered more accurately? I am Ko, and am aware of your query, my sister. To the first portion of your query, we would heartily agree that indeed the universe teems with forms of life, and at all times there are those who observe your illusion who offer themselves in one way or another in the speaking through those who are seeking to serve as channels or instruments for love and light. Because the array of entities is so widely variant, from the negative to the positive polarities, we agree that it is greatly recommended that those who would seek to serve as instruments undergo a process of training that is rigorous in the preparation of the instrument so that it may offer itself in the highest level of desire to serve and be able to tune itself at each serving as instrument in order to receive the contact that is able to withstand in a stable fashion and be able to offer itself that is well known as an instrument. This is to say, the study of the self to gain the knowledge of one is important in order that this self be offered at each working and be offered at the beginning of each working as a kind of filter through which a contact may speak after this contact has been challenged, shall we say, by the instrument that knows itself well enough to offer this self as instrument. As far as being able to aid other entities in contacting their guides, as they are called, we would suggest that this is a practice that also needs guidance. It is well that you seek your own inner guidance as to the techniques by which you would instruct another in this process so that there is the flexibility to utilize the strengths of each seeker, be it in visualization, in working with dreams, in the meditative state, or in the prayerful contemplation. Thus, your ability to serve another will be dependent in large part upon your ability to ascertain the qualities of the seeker and how best to guide this entity to utilize the qualities which are strong. Is there a further query, my sister? So instead of moving directly to a technique that I know will open up an awareness of some form of guidance, I should more skillfully find out what I need to know about that person and focus my own attention and that person's attention in developing that person's awareness of himself first. Is that what you're suggesting? I am Ko, and am aware of your query, my sister. Yes, you are correct in summary of your advice. It is well for each seeker to carefully study the self in order to ascertain the most effective avenues to travel in furthering the knowledge of the self and the Creator, which is the great self of all. We now move to a channeling on November 14th, 1993. The question this afternoon has to do with the concept of spiritual pride as it is balanced with an honest appreciation of your own efforts. We're all engaged in one kind of big effort to earn money, to do a life's work, to complete a certain job or task, and we were wondering just how much motivation one can hope for from appreciating your own efforts and where to balance the amount of appreciation with developing it into spiritual pride and being overly pleased with yourself and perhaps complacent, and who knows what else. Greetings in the love and light of the one infinite Creator. We are known to you as those of Quo. May we say what a privilege it is to be with this group at this session of working. We especially wish to greet the one known as G as this first time he has joined this particular group. We hope that our thoughts may helpfully inform and offer directions for further consideration. However, we always wish to emphasize that we have opinions rather than the absolute truth. These opinions are earned, shall we say, by experience. However, we as each of you are pilgrims still seeking that mystery, which we know not as it recedes ever before our approach. Take those opinions which feel to you like the remembrance of that which was already half known. Leave behind any thought which constitutes a stumbling block before your own discriminate. We correct this instrument discrimination. Let us begin focusing upon the query about spiritual pride and good works by looking at the various stories the teacher known to you as Jesus told concerning good works and money. The parable concerning the stewards who were given money to keep for the owner who was to be gone. This parable focuses upon the amount of energy put into using the gift rather than the amount of each gift in monetary value. The one with $5 made $5 more and was considered equal to the one who had $2 and made $2 more. However, to the one who simply kept the wealth of spirit, even that which that slave had was taken away. So we feel that the positive acceptance of spiritual responsibility is not only that which seems good, but that which has great value. Nor would we encourage those who serve the Creator to, shall we say, slap down the rising feelings of joy and service. Given the amount of spiritual gifts which you have, the parable would suggest moving further, attempting more, striving to be even more full of service. Using all that you have to offer, ever more of that which is the bloom and blossom of your own spiritual life. The currency of the spiritual life, the money, is the energy with which the seeker is willing to accomplish the attempt of doing that which the seeker's unique spiritual gifts suggest for his proper vocation. One entity may have a dramatic spiritual gift, a gift of healing, for instance. Another may have the spiritual gift of nurturing and spend the life dwelling with the children and the spouse and the extended family. That one who has healed, and we correct this instrument, in the process of living the devotional life has done the excellent thing. However, this excellence lies equally with that entity who has the modest gift that does not shine before the eyes of all men, if that entity offers heart and flesh in the attempt to give that which he has. Again, as we gaze at the parable given by the one known as Jesus the Christ, we see that the sheer amount of labor when using the spiritual gift is not in and of itself that which makes one effort greater or better than another. That is to say, that in the parable concerning the payment of money to those who had worked all day, and those who had worked a half day, and those who worked only 1 hour, all gained the same amount for their seemingly uneven labors. We suggest there is no accuracy in maintaining that one entity has done more than another because the effort was longer or harder. Rather, it is the moving into the work which stems directly from the spiritual gifts given to the seeker that the assessment of value considers. The one who moves into service with the prayer of being used in accordance with the Creator's will, whether this entity washed the dishes or found the nation, it is the equal desire to serve which has the equal value metaphysically. Now, what we are suggesting is that one cannot judge one's efforts by the amount of time it has taken, by its difficulty, or any other way, except insofar as the consideration remains focused upon the opening of the heart in service to the one Creator. This instrument is often fond of saying that one should take something in life very seriously, some great ideal or truth. However, this something should never be the self. Consider with us, then, how one can approach that greatly desired knowledge of where are my spiritual gifts and how may I offer them. The process of meditation over time is helpful in familiarizing the self with who that self is on the deeper levels. The whole process of attempting to become formally open to listening to the silent will of the one Creator is that which works many deeper levels to increase the flow of subconscious material through the limen of consciousness, so that more and more the meditator becomes aware of deeper truths or deeper gifts within its own self, so that more and more it becomes easier to recognize the opportunities for service along the lines of one's particular spiritual gifts. Once one has gone through this process and begun a life of service, or perhaps simply begun serving in hopes of finding a life of service, one may simply open the consciousness to the fullest extent, having within that spoken desire that is spoken to the self to serve, not as I will, but as the Creator wills. This stance or posture of keen desire and open willingness will in time always produce not one but often several ways of moving into more service. It is to the one focused all along on spiritual value or quality that the circumstances will become clear as a pattern for good works, as this instrument would call them. In other words, it helps greatly when seeking proper spiritual work to know consciously that you are looking for it. Again, we say spiritual service is the substance of all of those exchanges betwixt people and people, or people and ideas, wherein the seeker does attempt to witness to that point of view, which is that of the servant desiring only to be called forth into service. Now let us suppose that all have found their spiritual service. This never occurs, but for this discussion let us assume that one need look no further. Shall each seeker then be satisfied with the quality of good works it has produced? Perhaps by mentally answering this query in the head, one can see that somehow there is no proper answer to that query. Somehow, if one attempts to put the value here or there in work done by those who are serving one, has again missed the point. Those who pat the back after accomplishing spiritual works are not harming themselves in terms of the value of the work. The harm to the self has nothing to do with whether the work is good or not. The harm comes to the servant when it allows the work to be subjected to this reasoning process. Yes, it is incorrect and distinctly unhelpful for a spiritual seeker to be proud of its accomplishments, but more, it is irrelevant. As each attempts to increase the polarity of one's service, one is always caught and stopped abruptly in one way or another when it attempts to quantize or qualify the particular value of any particular spiritual work. Better it is to release these considerations completely. When one gazes within attempting to become a better servant, think not of the greatness of accomplishment or the other characteristics concerning such. Simply continue to ask, how may I serve? For there is no entity given brownie points, as this instrument would say. Each seeker works upon itself and no other, regardless of the spiritual work. Strip all from the mind that would suggest otherwise. Naked are you. You cannot be clothed with righteousness. You are clothed, each of you, my children, by the light of your desire to abandon all except the desire to serve. How then will you know when you have gotten it right, as this instrument would say? May we say that to each of you, the moment when you are one with that work, or to put it another way, when there is a feeling of complete freedom when doing that activity you hope will serve, then shall you be able not to pat the self upon the back, but to turn and give thanks, for the feeling of complete liberty is at the heart of the state of mind which does often signify service well done. Any pride whatsoever is, though understandable, not relevant to the spiritual walk, which attempts to express the bias towards compassion more and more. At this time we would deal with one detail and then would continue through the one known as Jim. The detail concerns that pause which occurred during this transmission. We feel that to point out what is occurring during the channeling process from our point of view may be helpful to those who attempt to understand this particular phenomenon. This instrument had moved too deeply into the trance state, and the request needed to be made to move more into energetic alertness. When this instrument felt the difference in vibration, it spent more of your time moving completely throughout the environment, being sure that there was the appropriate protection of the place, the working, and those within the circle. Only then was this instrument prepared to move forward. This process was important in achieving the appropriate, we search for the word here, this instrument's word is setup or arrangement. It was only after some period that the arrangement of connections between source and instrument was appropriately made. We thank you for your patience during this pause. It is always the good idea for the instrument who feels some change in energy to investigate that change rather than attempting to override it, and we thank you for your patience in allowing us to express these last thoughts. We would at this time move to the one known as Jim for the conclusion of this session of working. We leave this instrument in love and light. We are those known to you as Quo. Jim channeling, I am Quo, and greet each again in love and light through this instrument. At this time, it is our privilege to offer ourselves in the attempt to speak to any other queries which those present may have for us at this time. Question. If no one else has a question, I would have one, but it's not really on this subject. I wonder if you could comment, Quo, on the unusually strong feeling I had of being levitated during the time where I was waiting to find out what was wrong during that pause. The whole beginning of the channeling, I felt like I was almost being lifted off my seat. If you could comment in any way, I'd be interested. I am Quo, and am aware of your query, my sister. We find as the contact with your instrument, and indeed with any instrument over a period of time, continues, that there are side effects, shall we say, that go with the prolonged intensive contact. That you feel the sensation of weightlessness is simply a portion of this process by which you give yourself over to serving as an instrument and move into that portion of your subconscious mind that is partaking of this time-space portion of your illusion more fully than is normal. Thus, you feel the sensation of levitation or of floating that corresponds to a more malleable environment in which your physical laws have little impact. Is there another query, my sister? Yes, thank you for the answer. So we're not supposed to slap ourselves on the back and say, good job, okay. But encouraging and exhorting and empowering others has always seemed a part of being a servant. And it just seems to me that encouraging the self along those lines, I don't know. I guess maybe when you're encouraging others, it's more obvious that you're really praising the Lord, shall we say. When you're patting yourself on the back, perhaps you forget that you're basically praising the Creator. It certainly seems that someone should get the praise. Can you comment on the feeling? And I'm a little confused. I mean, I do feel that it is a spiritual thing. Definitely, you're supposed to encourage people in their efforts, so why not yourself? I am Quo, and am aware of your query, my sister. The encouragement to be most effective in hitting the heart of the illusion and its opportunities needs to be focused upon the one Creator as fully as one is able at any given moment, which is to say that as one is able to see the effort and the entities involved as the Creator and is able to give praise and thanksgiving for both, then one is giving the highest encouragement. We realize that there are many steps to this point, and encouragement may take any form and serve a useful purpose. We know that there are those gathered here wish to give the utmost in all efforts. Thus we give you the ideal, reminding each one will always fall short. To accept whatever one can do is to give the encouragement that is appropriate. Question. Quo, it is a sort of personal question, so could possibly comment in any way that you feel appropriate, including not at all. I was just wondering about my difficulty to stay in meditation and concentrate that I was noticing lately. Is there a way that I can look at it to be fruitful, or am I missing something just in seeing that it is difficult? How can I work with it somehow? I'm Quo, and I'm aware of your query, my brother. We would recommend that as any activity of the mind is noticed while you are pursuing the meditative state, that you take one step backwards in your mind and observe the activity as a passing event, thus redefining your meditative position in a larger context so that you always are aware that you seek the metaphysical moment of unity while observing the activities of your mind. Thus, the larger perspective will allow you to move more in harmony with the moment of meditation which you seek. Is there a further query, my brother? When I think about meditation, I think the effort going into it is important rather than the actual amount of time spent within the illusion. Yet there is a period to be devoted to tuning, so there, I assume, is some minimum, perhaps I could say minimum time required to get in tune and then move into the moment. Can you comment on that? I am Quo, and am again with this instrument. The most important portion of the meditative experience is cultivating the desire to meditate. This may be done in an instant. All other effort is an addition to this foundational effort. Thus, if you wish to tune or to practice any form of meditation after desiring to do so, you refine this desire and work with it in a specific fashion, and this working may take any amount of your time. However, to desire to meditate can be done in an instant. Is there a further query, my brother? I guess not. I am Quo, and we would take this opportunity to express our great gratitude to each present for asking for our presence in your circle working this day. We feel very privileged to be able to share our opinions with you, and as always, ask that you remember that we share that which has been helpful to us, and we hope that you will take only those concepts that are helpful to you, leaving all others behind. We at this time shall take our leave of this group, leaving each as always in the love and in the ineffable light of the one infinite Creator. We are known to you as those of Quo. Adonai, my friends. Adonai. And this concludes these channelings on spiritual pride. Why is this important? It's a good question. I was drawn to these because of my own personal experience, and I think it's an inevitable part of what happens when you gain a lot of spiritual knowledge. And as they say here, you can have all the knowledge in the world, you can read the most inspiring works, but then you have to take it that extra step. So you can have read every single book that's ever been written on spirituality or listen to the most amazing speakers, and it still is not enough. You got to take that extra step. But it's very common when you have all that knowledge to have a sort of pride. Maybe you can call it arrogance, but I have become aware of it sometimes when evaluating what somebody's telling me spiritually, and I'll catch myself in judging them, even if it's briefly, because I have to continually remind myself they may be more wise than me. They may have some unique information. And so it's been a powerful thing that I continue to remind myself. You're going to come upon people, and if you've been following this channel for a long time, you obviously have a lot of spiritual knowledge under your belt. So you're going to come upon some people that maybe are earlier on in their spiritual path, or they have gone about their spiritual path completely differently. And I'm just asking you to keep an open mind, because oftentimes you can block yourself from spiritual information because you're prideful. That's the thing that's important for me. If I'm too prideful, then somebody might give me some information I really need. They might say, hey, Brian, there's this thing called reality transurfing, or hey, Brian, there's this new meditation technique. And, oh, I think I'm so good because I've read all this and I have so much knowledge that I'm going to ignore what you say when in fact, everything is important. So I've tried to do that. And it has been helpful to me, not as being a teacher of spiritual principles, because I'm still a student. I don't consider myself any more than a first grade level teacher for this stuff because I don't know. But boy, oh boy, it is helpful to me when anybody talks to me about spirituality. And at the beginning, it may seem something pretty simple that I already know about, but oftentimes it's colored by some unique knowledge. And the more I open myself to that perspective, I find that everybody is a genius, a master, a guru, and I find all the time I'm finding tidbits from everybody that I meet. Now, there's a little contradiction in these two different channelings. One says that don't worry about spiritual pride, and the other says don't pat yourself on the back. And I think that Carla makes a good point. Shouldn't you pat yourself on the back because you're the creator, and you're only patting yourself on the back is awarding the creator, and that's true. We're all the creator. The point that they're trying to make, and at least in the questions that they're asking here, is that there is a point where spiritual pride can be a block on the spiritual journey. That spiritual pride can block your teaching and can block your learning. So that is the point. I will always be aware that I don't know anything. And no matter how much knowledge I've gained, I try to be humble. And that is the thing that is most important. I don't want to have a block that blocks my learning or my ability to serve. And I realize more and more as I teach and I regurgitate the stuff that I've learned and teach others, that something else is working through me. And that has helped me to be more humble. It is not me teaching, it is some other presence that is working through me. Many times I've done episodes where I don't remember saying anything. Those are the times when I find it very easy to not have any spiritual pride because I am not the one speaking. And oftentimes, if you realize when you're in these spiritual moments, some other thing comes through and basically channels, like Carla says, then I'm just incredibly grateful for the opportunity to sort of be a conduit for that information. And that is helpful to me. So is this important? It's important if it blocks you from learning and blocks you from teaching, and that is all. And most of the people that are listening to this are teachers. There's so many amazing people that listen to this podcast. So if you're teaching, just a quick little reminder that we don't know, to keep your mind open to the possibilities around you, because there's so many more wonderful things to learn, and that is a part of the spiritual process. You can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. Now available at newearth.art. Powerful fourth density technologies. Art magic. sigils, images designed to magnetize and broadcast specific energies and intentions. You can access these images to help you find true prosperity, large sums of money, true love, radiant health, and spiritual enlightenment, with unique portals into the new earth. These images are available for you. You can acquire prints of any image. You can acquire magnets, mugs, iPhone cases, t-shirts, hoodies, greeting cards, coasters, and several different gallery wraps and styles of canvas. You can also get these images in a variety of different sizes and dimensions. You can purchase these in a variety of different ways, and they are here to enable you to transform your life. You can go to wall previews and look at these images, and you can check them out with different dimensions. In many cases, you can get images up to 72 inches for any of these images. They are designed as unique technologies for you to look into, infused with magical light, at www.newearth.art. Welcome to the Reality Revolution.